The administration of Donald Trump is preparing airstrikes in the coming hours against several military targets in Venezuela, which, according to the United States, are involved in drug trafficking. Ports, airports, military bases, and runways could be targeted. This is reported by sources in the Pentagon. And this is probably the main news today in the United States of America. Trump says that he supposedly does not intend to launch missile and bomb strikes on targets in Venezuela. But the actions of the United States say otherwise. Donald Trump has sent a military group of 16,000 people to the shores of Venezuela. The forces include 8 surface warships, a nuclear submarine, and aircraft, including B-52 strategic bombers and F-35 fighters, but most importantly, the aircraft carrier Gerald Ford, with 5 escort ships, was sent to the Caribbean Sea. Given this context, Venezuela's self-proclaimed president, Nicolás Maduro, has already asked Russia for military help. Therefore, it can be stated that the United States has sent an unprecedented military squadron to the Caribbean Sea. And experts now doubt that, as they say in Washington, this is exclusively about fighting drugs. But in this situation, Venezuela is especially nervous, fearing a ground invasion by the Americans. My name is Alexei Pechi. Today is November 2nd. Let's discuss this topic in detail together. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, like the video, leave any comment under this episode, and be sure to subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pechi News. The link to it is in the description of this video. There we publish breaking news as it comes in. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so with any donation using the links and details in the description of this video. It says there, support the channel Alexei Pechia. Choose any format that's convenient for you. I appreciate any support you give. So, several American media outlets are reporting that sources in the Pentagon have said that the Donald Trump administration is considering the possibility of carrying out airstrikes on a number of military facilities in Venezuela, which, according to the United States, are involved in drug trafficking. Ports, airports, military bases and runways that Washington believes are used for drug smuggling could be targeted. According to representatives of the administration, the potential air operation would be aimed at infrastructure that connects drug cartels with the Venezuelan authorities. In short, the Americans suspect that essentially the army and drug cartels in Venezuela have become one and the same, and in fact state infrastructure is already being directly used by the drug cartels. Let me remind you, American forces have already conducted naval operations against vessels suspected of drug trafficking in the Caribbean and Pacific. Washington notes that the regime of Nicolás Maduro has effectively turned the country into a narco-state. United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio has already directly called this an operation against narco-terrorists and stated that Venezuela has become, quote, the Al-Qaeda of the Western Hemisphere. The United States is already increasing its military presence in the region. In particular, an aircraft carrier with destroyers armed with Tomahawk cruise missiles has been sent to the Caribbean Sea, as well as fighter attack 18 Super Hornet and AAA 18 Growler aircraft. In addition, B-52 and B-1 bombers have been conducting reconnaissance flights off the coast of Venezuela in recent weeks, monitoring the actions of the Venezuelan army. According to American officials, Trump has also authorized CIA covert operations in Venezuela. Trump refused to answer the question of whether this plan includes the physical elimination of Nicolás Maduro, limiting himself to the comment that Venezuela is under pressure. At the same time, Nicolás Maduro has already publicly emphasized that his country's army has about 5,000 Russian Iglasman portable air defense systems and several S-300 systems to protect strategic facilities. In addition, last week a plane arrived in Venezuela which, according to the United States, is linked to Russian military personnel, which may indicate potential support from Moscow in the event of a conflict. Internal documents from the United States government obtained by the Washington Post indicate that Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro did indeed request from Moscow at least the delivery of 14 anti-aircraft missile systems, repair and restoration of several Su-30 fighter jets, major overhaul of 8 engines, repair of 5 radars, and logistical support. At the same time, according to the Washington Post, Maduro sent requests for assistance to China and Iran, asking for expanded military cooperation, the supply of detection equipment, global positioning system jammers, and long-range drones. It is still unknown how Tehran and Beijing responded, but essentially Maduro asked Iran for the same Shahed drones. In addition, sources from the Washington Post report that Donald Trump sent a military group of 16,000 troops to the shores of Venezuela. According to the publication, the forces include 8 surface warships, a nuclear submarine, and aircraft including a B-52 strategic bomber and F-35 fighters. But the most important and telling thing is that the United States announced the deployment of a strike group led by Gerald Ford as early as October 24. Since then, this group has moved toward the shores of Venezuela. The White House described this move as ramping up efforts to fight drug trafficking in the region. And at this point, it starts to seem that Trump has a completely different goal. Why is that? The American aircraft carrier Gerald Ford, whose construction costs $13 billion, is currently the most expensive warship in the world. This giant, over 330 meters long, is accompanied by about 6 other warships. And this entire group set course for the Caribbean Sea. There, the aircraft carrier, with dozens of combat planes and helicopters on board, I emphasize, is supposed to support the strike power of the Ford, the fleet, and the units already deployed in the region. Once again, on board this massive aircraft carrier are exactly those fighters and more, which are needed to carry out strikes on Venezuela. According to official statements from Washington, the enemy in this case is exclusively international drug cartels, which transport their goods to the United States on high-speed boats. And recently, Trump called them the Islamic State of the Western Hemisphere. It's important to note that even in the United States, not everyone is thrilled with Donald Trump's methods, but at the same time, the United States Congress can hardly limit the American president in his actions here. The Republicans in the Senate blocked a bill introduced by the Democrats, which would have involved the legislative branch in making decisions about launching military strikes against the drug cartel. But it's obvious that the armada in the southern Caribbean Sea is not only aimed at smugglers. And that's why, of course, tensions in the region are rising significantly. So what exactly is Donald Trump planning? Well, of course, special attention is drawn to oil-rich Venezuela. In Washington, they have long sharply criticized its president, Nicolas Maduro, and do not recognize his re-election, citing fraud during the elections held in January. In August, Trump raised the reward for capturing Nicolas Maduro to $50 million, emphasizing that this is twice as much as was once offered for Osama bin Laden. According to the United States authorities, Maduro leads a drug cartel in which, it is claimed, units of the Venezuelan armed forces are also involved. In other words, in reality, the army, the government, and the drug cartels in Venezuela have become one and the same. It should be acknowledged right away that the United States changed governments in Latin American countries multiple times in the 20th century. The last time this happened was in Panama in 1989. In mid-October of this year, Trump approved a secret CIA operation in Venezuela. Several United States Navy ships are currently conducting exercises off the coast of Astana, this strange country of Trinidad and Tobago. That's actually right on the border with Venezuela. They got really close. Venezuela is asking, what are these joint military exercises between Trinidad and Tobago and the United States? They're saying it looks kind of absurd, but still. So we can assume that the Trump administration is staging this military show of force not only under the pretext of fighting drugs, but also for political reasons. It's obvious that what's happening clearly goes beyond the so-called war on drug cartels, but they wouldn't send a huge aircraft carrier just for that. At the very least, let's say, as a side effect, Trump could very well count on the overthrow of Nicolas Maduro. And here it's important that the biggest role, without a doubt, is played by natural resources, both fossil and other raw materials that are necessary for further accelerating technological competition, especially with an eye on China. Besides oil, Venezuela also has rich reserves of gold, iron, bauxite, ore, niobium, and tantalum, and so on. And now let me remind you that literally in mid-October, Trump rejected Maduro's offer of privileged access to Venezuelan mineral resources. He said they should have considered it sooner, as access methods are now completely different. Nicolas Maduro has accused the United States of staging a hostile provocation against Venezuela and threatening peace in the Caribbean. He presented himself as a peace guarantor, at the same time mentioning that the Venezuelan army has at least 5,000 short-range missiles. Maduro also ordered exercises to repel an invasion on the country's coast. And don't forget that Donald Trump already has a candidate for the presidency of Venezuela. We're talking about the opposition leader Maria Corina Machado, who this year received the Nobel Peace Prize and said she wants to dedicate her award to the Venezuelan people as well as to Donald Trump. And Machado has powerful supporters in the United States President's administration, primarily Secretary of State Marco Rubio. That's why the scenario of Maduro being overthrown is becoming more and more realistic. And most importantly, in Donald Trump's camp, there is support for a foreign policy concept that is considered a new edition of the Monroe Doctrine from 1823. It's now called the Monroe Doctrine. Well, like the Donald Trump Doctrine, but that was still the doctrine of James Monroe. James Monroe was the fifth. The President of the United States then told the European colonial powers about Washington's hegemonic claims over the Western Hemisphere, specifically over the entire American continent, the Caribbean and Greenland. And recently, by the way, it has already faced verbal threats of annexation made by Donald Trump. In the increasingly multipolar world, some of Donald Trump's supporters consider the new version of the Monroe Doctrine a key United States foreign policy concept. They claim Americans see the Western Hemisphere as solely their responsibility and assert exclusive hegemony over it. That's why I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like the video. That's it for now. Take care. Goodbye, everyone.